Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm from the Centre for Economic and Social Rights, and the CESR is also one of the co-conveners of the Post-2015 Human Rights Caucus alongside AWID and Amnesty International. So I'd like to use my few minutes here to ask, who's afraid of accountability? Now, it hasn't escaped everyone's notice that the title of the negotiation session in May scrupulously avoids mention of the A word, as has already been highlighted. Indeed, it has evolved or backtracked from monitoring and review and now just to follow up and review. The place of accountability in the Open Working Group outcome document was also weakened over successive drafts. Now, this suggests a troubling and short-sighted, I would say, aversion on the part of some states to anything that hints that they might be held accountable for their post-2015 commitments. And Ambassador Kamau highlighted this earlier, this anxiety among member states about the use of the term accountability, and it's also been foregrounded here, but I've been very glad to hear some of the distinguished ambassadors here reclaim and embrace the term. So yes, the SDGs will be voluntary political pledges, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't seek to put in place robust, people-centered accountability mechanisms and processes. Accountability doesn't just mean courts, conditionality, and punishment. Sometimes the legal system plays a role, yes, but accountability is much broader than this, and more far-reaching and transformative than this narrow view might suggest. For example, accountability might encompass and include reporting, monitoring by authorities, communities, and independent bodies, complaints mechanisms, data and data analysis, budget analysis and expenditure tracking, policy review, hearings, surveys, and report cards, among many other tools and practices which we can see on the ground in many countries already. Now, by allowing for better feedback loops between states, people and communities, and other development stakeholders, putting in place effective accountability mechanisms will increase the credibility, ownership, and effectiveness of the post-2015 development agenda. It will also make progress towards the goals more inclusive, more empowering, and more egalitarian, ensuring that no communities or groups are left behind, as long, of course, as the processes put in place actively seek out the voices of people living in poverty and marginalized groups. From the local level to the high-level political forum, we should be hearing regularly from these individuals and communities what is working for them and what isn't, and identifying who should be doing what to improve their situation. This will also generate important evidence about successful strategies and policies, and ones that are not performing as they should. As the Secretary-General eloquently surmised in his synthesis report, we need a new paradigm of accountability, and I quote, "Not one of conditionality or north to south, nor south to north, but rather one of all actors, governments, international institutions, private sector actors, and organizations of civil society, and in all countries to the people themselves. This is the real test of people-centered, planet-sensitive development." I'd like to applaud the Secretary-General for positioning monitoring and accountability mechanisms as a core component of the overall post-2015 agenda at the national, regional, and international levels. However, his proposal should represent a floor, not a ceiling. Yesterday, the Post-2015 Human Rights Caucus issued a joint statement responding to the synthesis report. One of the main things we highlighted is that the Secretary-General's proposals on monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, as he calls it, can be built upon and improved through a human rights perspective. Now, his proposal positively reflects the need to ensure national-level ownership and accountability for the SDGs, but this must be underpinned, of course, by a safe and free environment for civil society and access to information. Accountability is impossible if these elements are not in place. Meanwhile, at the global level, truly people-centered participatory accountability will require more than just a global component for knowledge sharing, as it's termed in the report. At all levels, the post-2015 accountability mechanisms must be robust and comprehensive enough to cover private sector actors, partnerships, and IFIs, as well as states, premised on full transparency and the right to information, and encompassing extraterritorial obligations. We also urge member states to recognise and examine the role that existing human rights mechanisms, properly strengthened, can play in the process. And of course, as highlighted already, we can also learn some important lessons from existing human rights monitoring mechanisms, including the UPR of the Human Rights Council. And I'd be happy to share some thoughts on this in Q&A or in person if anyone's interested. So in conclusion, I'd like to emphasise that, far from being afraid of accountability, member states should embrace it with open arms, not as an optional add-on or an onerous punishment device, but rather an integral part of the agenda itself. Done right, the post-2015 accountability architecture can uplift the whole agenda into the realm of the tangible, empowering, and communally owned. Anything less than full and meaningful accountability risks rendering the SDGs a set of lofty but empty promises, rather than the transformative agenda that civil society, the Secretary-General, and many of you states delegates envision. Thanks very much.